All right. Well, I appreciate everybody for joining. We have an exciting topic with a great speaker joining me, Cheryl O'Neill, and she's from our strategic partner, Imperva. To give you an introduction into myself, this is Chris Willis. I have over 15 years of experience in information security. 12 of those years have been spent with SARES, working with clients all across the country and all verticals, those largest verticals being financial, insurance, healthcare, energy, and higher education, consisting of startups to Fortune 500 companies. At SARES, to give you a little bit of background on who we are and what we do, we were founded by Gale Sayers, former Football Hall of Famer of the Chicago Bears. He founded a company over 30 years ago, and our mission is to help clients solve business challenges with innovative IT solutions. Our success is defined by the quality of relationships that we have with our clients and the impact we have on helping those clients succeed. Simply put, our client success defines our success. And we deliver on these missions by providing high touch, a personalized experience, solving the client's challenges, and providing them with the highest quality of solutions that meet their business challenges and goals. We have offices, 5 offices across the nation with trained, certified, and experienced engineering capabilities. And we have practices in data center, those solutions involving cloud servers, storage, virtualization, and networking, and enterprise security, which I'm involved in. In enterprise security, we have 3 pillars: visibility, security, and optimization. And within those pillars, we have focuses on endpoint, network, cloud, users, and data, which we're going to be talking about today. And we also have professional services across both of those data center and enterprise security practices. So one thing I definitely wanted to kind of mention is in our enterprise security practice, we track emerging trends and technologies in information security. And it's interesting to note kind of how Imperva, our partner here, kind of meets a lot of those areas. And so I'll mention a few of those areas: CASB, Cloud Access Security Brokers; endpoint detection and response; machine learning and mathematics; user and entity behavioral analytics; threat intelligence, threat analytics; insider threat deception and detection; incident response; technology automation and integration; and data-centric audit and protection. So we're going to be talking mainly around data and databases, but definitely Imperva has a lot of solutions in those other areas. So I wanted to turn it over to Cheryl O'Neill, but let me introduce her. She is a 15-year information security and compliance technologist working with the largest financial services, life science, and Fortune 500 companies to safely secure their most sensitive and regulated data. In her current role, Cheryl manages the Imperva Secure Sphere Data Security Solutions. Cheryl?
Thank you very much, Chris. Welcome to today's session. I hope you all learn a lot about SARES and Imperva today. Let me give you a little background about Imperva. Imperva is a leading provider of cybersecurity solutions that protect business-critical data and applications. The company's Secure Sphere, Counterbreach, and Encapsula and Skyfence product lines enable organizations to discover assets and risks, protect information wherever it lies, in the cloud or on-premise, and comply with regulations. The Imperva Defense Center is a world-class research team comprised of leading experts in data and application security. They are continually enhancing the Imperva products with up-to-the-minute threat intelligence and publish regular quarterly reports that provide insights and guidance on the latest threats and how to mitigate them. Imperva is headquartered in Redwood Shores, California, with offices around the world. You can visit us at www.imperva.com and visit our blog and Twitter for some of the latest news. With that, I'd like to shift gears and move into today's presentation. Today we're going to focus on the reasons why you might want to invest in database audit and protection, and specifically the security and compliance factors that you should take into consideration as you're looking at your solution. we live in a different world today than we did 5 years ago. Direct external attacks and persistent internal attacks are the norm, the new norm. You are under attack. Those attacks are not going to stop. They're not going to diminish and stop someday. And you need to take a new approach to your security. It's not, when you will, it's not if you're going to be breached. It's going to be when you breach and what you do after they breach you. And I think one of the key points here is to understand why you're being breached. And, Chris, this may be an area that you can help our customer, help our audience understand, what it is that the attackers are after and why they're so persistent and in this approach to accessing your data.
Absolutely, Cheryl. So attacks are inevitable, like you mentioned, and the reason why is because compute and networking is getting really cheap for them. Bandwidth is there, and if you take a look at, I read an article recently from SC Magazine, and it says hackers are investing 40% of their crime proceeds into new criminal techniques. So while organizations may spend in IT security defense, but it's seen as a cost center, their adversaries are investing in what they call their profit center. So what is it that they're seeking? They're seeking data, and any type of data, intellectual property, PHI, PII. But why are they seeking this data? And it's because of money. So the more data they get, the more money they obtain as well. So if you take a look at where does data exists everywhere. But where does the valuable and contextual, important, sensitive, and vast amount of data reside? It resides in databases. And in today's world, we're keeping everything. So we have lots of data, big data. So, hacking users, endpoints, networks, servers, and the like, they're all attempting to gather additional information to get to databases. So I kind of, some questions I have is, what protections do you have for your databases? Did you even know that there were protections for databases? Do you currently have any applications that talk to databases? Do you know how these applications talk to databases? Do you know how they authenticate to their database? Do you know if they use hard-coded credentials? So ultimately, these are all things that we're asking clients, and a lot of individuals didn't know there was actually a database type of security solution. So Cheryl's going to talk more about that.
I am. Thank you, Chris. And I do want to talk about the shifting trends in this market. This reflects my own career to some extent. I've spent a career coming up through the information security side, and the main driver for that for many, many years was the compliance. People saw it, as you said, as a cost center. They were looking at, they needed to hit that box, for the auditors. And we're seeing that mindset shift as people recognize that it's not about compliance anymore. It's about truly securing the data and taking steps to protect the organization from the risk that a breach represents. And so that shift fundamentally changes both the mindset and approach the companies take, but also the technology they need to build their solution upon. And then it takes into account, where is your organization putting that data? You mentioned that, a lot of that data is in your data center or in your database, but where are those databases living these days? They're no longer in your on-premise, they may not even be in your data center any longer. They may be hosted in the cloud, they may be in a managed service rack space, they may be all over the place. And so you don't have that same ability to put those hardened perimeters around them. In addition, companies are pushing that data right out to the edge. We're speeding up our processes by putting the data on our mobile devices, putting the application, the data in tablet applications so people can run workflows. We're putting it out on our websites to drive dynamic customer experiences. As that data gets closer and closer to the web, it becomes more vulnerable. So taking steps to protect that data while it's buried deep within the enterprise and while it's at the edge of the perimeter or beyond is an essential part of your security strategy. And of course, everything is scaling. everybody has more data. Everything is getting bigger. The days of having, just small amounts of data and small data sets is no longer, something you can keep track of. We frequently go into organizations and run the discovery process, and they find, dozens or hundreds of databases they had no idea even existed. Somebody in development grabs a production database and starts replicating it, and it has, thousands or tens of thousands of sensitive records in there, and that data just starts moving around in a peer-to-peer type of methodology, and you have no knowledge of that within your organization unless you have the ability to go out and look. So these are some of the things that are changing. And so what we want to do is we want to take a look at who actually within your organization has access to your data and why. What do you do, and how do you respond to sensitive inappropriate behavior and suspicious behavior? An interesting stat recently released indicated that an incident response team could reduce the cost of a breach by $16. But if they involved an outside team that didn't understand where that data lived and how it was being accessed, it actually would increase the cost of responding to an incident by $14. So you can see that the difference here is, you have a vested interest in understanding where your data is, who's accessing it, and how you're going to respond to incidents. Let's take a deeper look at some of the incidences. You've probably, if you're in your security team or maybe even in the compliance team, you've probably looked at the Verizon reports and some of the other reports out there. Hacking of web credentials and phishing is a big deal. But did you look at it and understand that the insider threat, while it only represents 22% of the incidents, actually results in 49% of the record exposure? That's a disproportionate amount of risk there. And it also can be explained by the fact that those insider threats took a lot longer to discover. And a lot of times it's not the inside team that's doing the discovery. Only 20% are discovered internally. That means 80% are discovered by external teams or people reporting they've been breached, that their data has been breached or, manipulated. Response times. How long does it actually take companies to discover it? 83% of the victims took weeks or months to discover a breach. If you're doing business in Europe, if you're a multinational company or you're going to be processing data from Europe, you need to look at GDPR and some of the new requirements that are coming down. Even maybe some of the requirements in the new Data Shield requirements that passed this week. You may not have as much time as you've had in the past, and certainly you're not going to want to stand up and make those reports that say it took us, 7 months to discover that we had a leak internally. This last stat is the one that floors me. You do business with 3 banks. I do business with more than 3 banks. One of those companies is not securing your personal data. 1 in 3 companies is not securing personal data. I wish this was not true, but I see enough people come through the organization that we do know that this reflects what we see in our customer and prospect database. So it's something that we need to look at and we need to take consideration. As a person, do you want your data exposed or do you want the companies to take an ownership of that? One of the ways to take ownership of that is active monitoring. It's going to provide the protection and it's going to help simplify your compliance. You're going to have your attacks on your web apps, users, and your data stores. With a SecureSphere application, SecureSphere actually has 2 components. That has a web application firewall and a database activity monitoring solution. Many people don't know the history of SecureSphere. These products actually started out as a single product because Imperva saw that you couldn't split apart security. You had to look at it holistically. And so the product started out as a single product. And only after the market, started segmenting them and saying, no, we don't want to mix these two things. Did the company separate these into two products? But they still share a common management layer and a common reporting background. And they still both were built for security purposes with the ability to deliver and simplify compliance. But under the hood, these are security products that were built and designed together, and they remain in lockstep, protecting both your web applications and your data, both from external and internal threats. Chris, I think this is a good time to bring in Sayers and kind of talk about what you see in the market and some of the things that you're out there doing.
Absolutely, and you bring up some good points. And organizations not knowing what's really going on in the core of their environment, and having that visibility. I mean, oftentimes we use perimeter protection security solutions. We don't use too much into the core. It's seen as being disruptive. And the organizations, you don't know what you don't know. So what we do at Sayers, and we do this quite often, is we provide non-intrusive assessments. And those assessments are going to help identify what's going on in the core environment. What are the applications are running? How many databases are on there? What ports are they using? Who's using them? What data is contained within them? Is this consumer type databases? Is it recreational? Is it enterprise? And then what type of exposure do they have to the outside world? Is it legacy databases that just haven't been taken offline yet? So all this is stuff that we've experienced, and Sayers has the ability to come in there and provide these assessments. Oftentimes we'll do these at no charge. So depending on the engagement, let us know, and let us help to identify what's going on within the core of your environment.
Great. Okay. Just to sort of kind of sum this up before we move into our next section, the monitoring considerations have changed. 2 years ago, we monitored for compliance on our critical systems. What we did is we monitored for a few activities, and we monitored privileges accounts because that's what we needed to report to the auditors. Our policies were fairly simple, and they varied by department and database. The logs were consolidated quarterly, and they were published, and user rights were generally reviewed on an ad hoc basis, and sometimes they were reviewed by management and some not. Change tickets, manually reconciled for audit. 2 years later, we're looking across our client base, and we're seeing a very different approach to this. They're looking to monitor all sensitive data. They're looking to monitor all data, user database activity, and look for that anomalous behavior. This is where that machine learning comes in, our counter breach technology. How can we utilize this information we know about, existing patterns, or how can we spot the patterns in data and then use the anomalous information to drive dynamic policy and changes? They want to unify the policies across all of their heterogeneous environments. So, the days of being able to reconcile Oracle native audit with your SQL Server native audit with your Hadoop native audit, all that took time, and you don't have time to respond. We talked to a large healthcare provider, and it took them 3 weeks to get their information, their alerts from their systems up to their SIM products. Well, in the security world, 3 weeks is not real time. That just does not cut it. You need something that truly is real time and that you can respond to and have a chance of getting back and, tracing that and investigating that incident to see what you can do and hopefully, stop and block suspicious behavior. Automating user rights and review management. You need to minimize the access to that data. Who has access and why? You need to look at that. You need tools that actually can help you find the effective rights, not just the granted rights. And you need to integrate your change management. If you've got a change ticket for a database change, you want your tool to actually go out, look in your change management tool, ServiceNow or whatever you're using, and say, is this change approved? Do I allow this change to be made to the database? And then you want to update those records so that when the audit happens, you have the simplicity of just running a report that shows you all of your reconciled tickets. And these are just some of the things that we are seeing shifting, and that we're supporting within our client base. Chris, this is an area where I know you guys are really seeing a lot of change. What do you see from the compliance, shift from compliance to data protection?
Yep, absolutely. I definitely see a shift because organizations, having to comply with these requirements out there, having a monitoring solution is not just a checkbox, but compliance and being compliant does not protect the data. You have to use modern technology which can simplify, automate, use machine learning, the behavior and the heuristics and other methodologies is much quicker than human interaction can. But make use out of it, and make use of it for the business to actually provide security. So get into the logs, get into these events, and make use of it. When you mentioned the company that took 3 weeks to actually get the logs into the SIM tool, obviously, there's a big disconnect there. And then what type of value are they getting out of those logs? Probably not much, because at that point it's kind of stale. So in our experiences with security audits, clients are letting compliance drive their strategy and consume their available resources. Security for the business and data need to drive the strategy, while also becoming and maintaining compliant with the regulations and other requirements out there. And Sayers can help with this. We help our clients build these strategies and how they're going to go about this, and testing the results, and allow them to progress forward in a more effective and efficient manner.
Great. Okay, let's take a look at how they can actually do some of those things. So now we're going to look at, look at the monitoring options that may be available to companies today. We know from our experience in the market that about, a third of the companies out there provide no protection at all to their, and that means they're probably not doing any compliance either. How they're passing, maybe they're not subject to audits, maybe they utilize other methodologies for passing their audits. Sometimes we don't get answers to those questions, but at least 1/3 of the companies out there are not doing audit. Then there's those companies that choose to use the built-in and native audit capabilities. As Chris mentioned, these aren't providing any protection, and they are poor compliance because the native audit is a database tool that was set up for the DBA to monitor what was going on in his database so he could tune it. It is not designed for a compliance team, and it certainly is not designed for security purposes. So you're trying to utilize that square peg in a round hole is not going to work. It's not going to work well, and it certainly isn't going to be a smooth process. So the third option is the one that we'd like to encourage people to investigate, and that is implementing a dedicated database auditing solution where protection and compliance are both accounted for. And these are typically called off-database solutions. But before we move into that, one of the things we want to look at is why do companies choose no audit? If there's a free database solution, why are companies still not doing any audit at all? At least something should be better than nothing, right? Well, not really. What we find is that when companies turn on the native audit, the first thing their DBAs see is the performance impact on their database. So they may let it run for a few months, 6 months, and then they get tired of the performance impact because they're getting their SLAs beat up because of the 10, 20%, 25% overhead that the native audit tools have an impact. I mean, if you do the math on that, if you start adding up the database license requirements, the rack and space requirements, it adds up quickly. That storage is not insignificant because those audit logs are getting written back to the database themselves. And so you're utilizing up prime real estate on your high performance disks. You can archive it off, but then it's not available to consolidate into your reports. Those reporting, it's manually intensive to normalize native logs and then bring them into a format that works for your reporting purposes. And as we mentioned, if you try to push that information into the SIM, it lacks context. That's one of the chief complaints we hear from customers, that thought by moving to a SIM they would resolve their problems of false positives. And what they've found is they've not solved that problem at all. It's just gotten more expensive. Now they're paying for an extra tool to find out they have too many false positives they can't investigate. So there has to be context around the information. And of course, the DBA team is not necessarily interested in doing compliance or security. They tend to be too small for the task they've been asked to do, which makes them busy. And so they're not going to be interested in, providing extra services to the broader organization. And Chris, I think this is a great place this is probably where you live and breathe, is working with these DBA teams and seeing what the pain they go through as they look at some of these solutions.
Absolutely. So definitely performance is a huge factor for the database and the database administrators, and the program that they have. With the reason why they have this database. They have a front-end web server, they have a database, they want things to be retrieved quickly. So they're concerned. They're concerned with blocking in front of databases. Little do they know they actually already have a firewall blocking the web application. And the thing is, the web application, what type of security is in that? And if the web application is holding credentials and is vulnerable, now you just made your database vulnerable. So you need additional layers. And ultimately, if it's important for the client's business, it's going to be important for the adversaries as well. They're going to be able to make that turn into dollars for them. So when performance is impacted by security, security is often disabled or not used. And I've seen in situations where clients were under attack, the security solution was being bogged down, and another department will bypass the security solution so that the application can get back to where it was. The thing is, the network was under attack, the client was under attack, and they bypassed the security solution. So when we think about incident response, it's not just for a breach has occurred. Incident response should be anything that's business impacting. So, is the security solution being bogged down because we're under attack? We should have an incident response at this point. What do we do? Do we want to bypass the firewall or not? Do we want to bypass the system? But oftentimes, not doing anything at all is not really an option. You absolutely can put in security solutions that are out of path. So there's absolutely going to be no disruption, but they also don't know what type of disruption they're going to have even when they're in path. It's, fractions of milliseconds of latency. So it's non-negligible. Performance and security can absolutely be obtained. And think about other planning for incident response rather than breaches, business impact.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And just to put it out there, so some of you may be wondering, so if Native Audit has a 10 to 20% overhead on your database, what does SecureSphere? SecureSphere typically has a 3 to 5% overhead, and that's if you use the local agent. If you need a zero footprint on your database, there is a network monitoring option that has zero performance overhead on your database. So we'll touch on this a little later in the presentation, but I just wanted to make sure I put that out there because I'm sure somebody had that question, was thinking about it. So we've talked about the difference between compliance monitoring and security monitoring. Let's dig a little bit deeper into this. So if we're monitoring for different purposes, do we use a one-size-fits-all model? And is that information that those two teams need the same? And should the policies be written the same way and executed simultaneously or in linear fashion? How does that work, and what does that look like at scale? So what we want to take a peek at is the traditional compliance monitoring. It used to be, the tools around this tended to be very DBA centric. As I mentioned earlier, they're narrow in scope and scale. The information was recorded for future review. And there was very little, if any, correlation with other best-of-breed security solutions. So it's a fairly small niche type of solution. But now as we shift into security, we're seeing the change here. We're seeing that it's monitoring for security is broader. And so we need a team and task-centered approach. The compliance team needs their tools, the security team needs their tools, and the incident response team needs their tools. And it needs to be task-centric so you can get on point quickly. You need to have a very broad visibility, and it needs to scale across the entirety of your data ecosystem. You need to be able to alert and block in real time, depending on the suspicious behavior you're seeing. There has to be correlation with other best-of-breed security solutions. You have to leverage and have to be able to be leveraged by other tools that you've invested in, and that correlation has to pass context back and forth and leverage the assets so that you're not creating silos within your system. This is kind of a key. And when you start looking at what it means at a more detailed level, let's take a peek at that, what it might mean. So for compliance, you might be monitoring and looking at this amount of data. You're looking at your use cases are going to be separation of duty, and you're looking at the secure storage of your compliance logs. When you start adding that security, you're going to be adding a lot more activities at your database level that you need to monitor. You're going to be changing how you execute your rules evaluation, and that execution has to be extremely high speed, because now instead of auditing 1 out of 100 activities on your database, you may be auditing 50% of that activity, and your evaluation tool has to operate at a speed that can keep pace with your fastest system. So if you look across your data ecosystem, you're going to have a mix of some, just standard, low volume, low velocity databases, but you're going to have 1 or 2 that are high end, high speed, high volume databases. So if your tool uses legacy type of technology that is slow to write and read, then it can't keep pace. How is that evaluation engine going to keep up with you across your entire organization? So you've got to have the solution you select has to have that high speed evaluation that can scale. It needs to be flexible. You're going to have some databases where you can put a network agent on those, but you're also going to have situations where you need to use network monitoring, either because of company policies, or just the fact that you got a database that's running hot. It's already at 95%. You can't afford to take a chance of it going down. So you may want to opt for a network or a hybrid type of solution. And those contextual security alerts, you need your logs to come back and provide the information so that when you do respond to an incident, you have the information you need and you can drill through real time to get at more data. Chris, can you talk to some of the things you see at this level? When you're dealing with the customers at this level of policy creation and management.
Absolutely, and I think it really centers around identity management. I see a lot in this area, and privileged user accounts. So credentials are very important. In order to get access into a database, you have some credentials, and you need to make sure that the permissions associated with those credentials are defined properly, and you have visibility on that. So every major breach which involves data extraction has involved compromised credentials. If you don't have credentials, you can't get into the database. So you have to compromise something to get into that database and get access to it, unless it's actually just been exposed with no credentials requirements. So using security software and secure development practices, multi-factor authentication, privilege escalation management tools, and access tools will significantly improve security. And Secure Sphere's ability to audit, alert, and react to suspicious activity is crucial to ensuring your data doesn't become compromised. So I think that's, it's very important that, a legitimate user, just because he is approved to do something doesn't mean that an account wasn't compromised and now is doing something that shouldn't be occurring.
Great. Okay. All right. I just want to talk about some of the differences that you'll see out there in the tools. The 2 big monitoring tools in the market today are Imperva, Secure Sphere, and IBM Guardium. I'm going to walk you through a case study and just kind of highlight the differences between the, that this particular client, which is a major computer manufacturer, had. They were an existing Guardium user, and they did a very detailed total cost of analysis, total cost of ownership review during this process. So they were using IBM Guardium for 3 years. They had 135 of the IBM virtual appliances and were able to monitor about 500 databases. These, we're talking physical database servers here, not database instances. That puts the ratio of database servers to IBM appliances at about 3.7 databases per appliance. It took them 3 years to deploy that to all 135 appliances, and they actually never finished the full deployment. They had more databases than that, but they bottlenecked at 500 and could go no further. They had hired extra staff and ended up with about 10 full-time equivalents, and they were using 100% of each of those people to operate and maintain the Guardium solution. Once the client decided IBM could not complete the deployment to 1,000 servers, they made the decision to move to Imperva. To be fair, they had not evaluated Imperva before they originally selected IBM Guardium. Imperva then deployed 65 appliances to monitor 500 databases, and we did it in about 60 days. Well, I'm not sure how many they're currently running. We deployed to 1,050 databases in less than 1 year on the same 65 server virtual appliances that we had deployed originally. The team chose not to lay off anyone, but they are now using less than 50% of each of those people to maintain the solution, essentially recovering 5 full-time equivalents that can be utilized in other projects. More importantly, they were able to extend the functionality. So under IBM, they were doing just compliance level type of privileged user monitoring. Now they've expanded that, and they're proactively blocking and monitoring for security to eliminate theft from data theft and loss from these systems. Chris, is this kind of something you're seeing within the clients you've worked with?
Absolutely. We actually, worked with a client recently, a large credit agency, huge IBM mainframe shop, and the spark really came from their clients. They were being demanded to ensure that they're being monitoring for breaches and data exfiltration, make sure that the data is being protected, and they chose Imperva. And they chose Imperva because of the usability and performance. And they're now looking at them for more technologies from Imperva, and they're basically making it a part of their standard security stack in their core of their network for all databases moving forward, which is definitely a very good, validation to what you just mentioned as well. But it's important to note that, you can obtain better security at a lower cost. And this is common finding that we see all the time, and find the right technology that strategically and tactically aligns with the customer's requirements while also saving them FTEs, headaches, complications, and more is something that we strive to do. So we set out to understand our clients' environments so that we can assist them in building them their ROI, whether it's the purchase of new technology or the implementation of something that's already owned, making sure that, a lot of times they already have the technology, it's the implementation of it and it's optimization of it. So we kind of get into that triad we always hear about: people, process, and technology. Full implementation and utilization of the technology, lower the reliance on people and the human error associated with that, and obviously help define the process to seamlessly integrate the technology into the current workflow and business, procedures and such.
Great, thanks, Chris. Just to recap on that customer, since it was a total cost of ownership, when they finished their analysis, their labor costs dropped by over 50% compared with their Guardium deployment. It took 60 days to roll SecureSphere out to the 500 databases that IBM had taken 3 years to reach. We then expanded the rollout to 1,050 databases in under a year, and the total operating cost, annual operating cost, dropped by 72% to So this customer is still a very loyal customer and tends to speak annually at our SKO. That's just kind of the partnership that we have with companies to ensure that they maintain that level of comfort and just partnership with us to achieve that security they're looking for. Moving into the practical applications of data activity monitoring, where do you start? What do you do first? Typically in phase one, where we're seeing customers start, is in the sensitive data audit. This is the basic, JSOX, SOX, PCI, HIPAA type of compliance. People tend to start there to simplify that compliance. That'll include the privileged user monitoring that Chris has spoken about, where we're going to enforce the separation of duty and monitor all the local activity on local database servers. If you have the need, we'll flip on blocking, or I should say the appetite for that, we'll turn on blocking. Then we'll move into data theft prevention. This is, or in some cases, you can look at this as the prevention of loss of sensitive data. And these are one of the three typical projects that we start to see customers roll out with. Phase two, they're going to start to look at a broader range of use cases, data across borders, change reconciliation. This has become a real hot one. They like having, now that they've got those other ticketing systems, they want the integration. And it seems like a simple win, and it saves them a lot of time and effort. It helps close down, some gaps in their audits. VIP data privacy. We're seeing this pick up in some Latin American companies being able to, protect sensitive data that's stored in some of those other systems. Ethical walls. If you're going through an M&A, we had a health provider that was using a Guardium-based solution, and they brought on a new company and were not able to deploy Guardium to that new acquisition quickly. And the new company got breached, and it made headlines. It was messy. Being able to ethically and bring on those companies very quickly into the system and yet maintain those walls. User tracking, keeping track of inside users. Are they malicious? Are they careless? Or are they compromised? Being able to track that and doing it all with a secure audit trail. This is just kind of some of, that's kind of the phases. If you're looking at your budget for next year, and some of these projects are on that list, this is, SecureSphere is a good fit for those solutions. Chris, this may be a slide that you can talk to better than I can, but I'm just going to set it up and basically say there are 4 levels. SecureSphere utilizes a 3 to 4 level architecture. You're going to have your source, where we collect information from, and that may include a network monitoring situation, or it may include the actual installation of an agent on the database. Then there's the gateway level, where the actual analysis takes place. And then there's a management server that collects and handles the reporting level. And this is done real time. This is not like some of the other solutions out there where things have to be batch uploaded. This is all streamed through by utilizing our flat file architecture that's similar to a big data model. We're able to stream that information directly to the MX and do real-time reporting and incident investigations. For organizations that are large, we have a security operations manager or manager of manager, where things can be rolled up so you can monitor more system health-orientated aspects of the solution. Okay. The integration levels that I spoke about generally are done at the MX level. This is where we can integrate to your LDAP system, your SIM system, your ticketing system. We can actually integrate to anything that can take a database connection or an RSS feed. We have a REST API and it can integrate with virtually anything out there. We provide Splunk-based databases out of the box. You can go to Splunk, the Splunk Marketplace, and download the dashboard free of charge. As we move forward, we want to look at some of the other investments and what we're working with today. We have an out-of-the-box integration with the FireEye malware solution. And as I mentioned, we have the dedicated Splunk data dashboard and integration. There is a standard integration for other SIM tools, but the Splunk-based one, or Splunk one, is an enhanced one. We can do enhanced lookups with LDAP and other security tools. So if you have an LDAP solution, we certainly can look up and use the user data, but we can also look up and then do enhanced, we can enhance the metadata that's used during the evaluation process or in policy evaluation by looking up other information that that may be pertinent to the policy being evaluated or the activity being monitored. We can enforce those change management policies to ensure that you're staying within your compliance, and we can track users from the web application. So if they're coming through the WAF, we can actually correlate that information, their web activity, with the database activity. If you're familiar with how this works, you know that this is an extremely challenging thing to do, and we are the only company on the market doing it. IBM doesn't have a WAF, so this certainly is not something they could even entertain doing. Okay. And when you're ready, SecureSphere is ready for you to move into the cloud. We have support for both Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure. There is an Imperva data masking solution. This is a great way to reduce your risk footprint within the organization. Simply eliminate a lot of that sensitive data from your non-production systems. It's a very cost-effective way of doing that. For those that are interested in better user management and monitoring to protect from the insider threat, we have the new counter breach solution, which is extremely effective at detecting those anomalous behaviors within your user environment. I would like to just briefly introduce counter breach so that you understand what it is and how it's going to work, and why the combination of SecureSphere with counter breach is more effective than, say, SecureSphere with Splunk. So SecureSphere knows who exactly is accessing your data. It can determine if the access is okay, and it allows you to respond, quickly. And this is where the connection of the contextual information is going to come together. We needed a solution that could pass that information seamlessly back and forth between the two entities and understand that contextual information. So Counterbreach provides an out-of-the-box dashboard where you can look at an individual's behavior, see what's going on, and it actually will rate it against its peers. So you can see, this person's had, how many anomalies, but then you'll be able to actually look at where what they've touched, and how it relates and compares to other users. Obviously, this is not an interactive dashboard, but in the demo, we actually go, okay, John is is a controller in California. What does the other activity of the other controllers in the group look like? What is the anomalous behavior? Why is his behavior different? Okay. And it goes through that type of analysis, and then that information gets leveraged from SecureSphere and then put back into SecureSphere so we can update the policies and protect against that. So that's what you're seeing here is kind of that architectural model. The information, the monitoring detail is fed from SecureSphere into the learning and detection module of Counterbreach. The behavior is analyzed, and then there's also some deception tokens that can be deployed on the end user's endpoint devices. And that also feeds in so we can keep track of both sets of behavior. Then the Counterbreach provides that information contextually. So not only can it tell you that there's been an incident, or it can tell you the ramifications of that incident and provide potential remediations for that. It can push that information then back into SecureSphere where you can update policies to block and quarantine the solution. Okay. That kind of wraps up our presentation for today. I would like to highlight that Imperva is the Gartner Magic Quadrant, or excuse me, Gartner Market Guide for Data-Centric Audit and Protection Leader. And we've held that space for the 2 years they've been doing this report. There is no MQ. This is the equivalent of that report. And so that puts us, if you will, in the upper right-hand quadrant. And maybe some of the questions you want to think about, and Chris, you can talk to this to some extent, is some of the questions here you might want to ask within your own organization and decide how you want to approach the items going forward. Okay, Chris, any closing remarks today?
So, food for thought, questions companies should be able to answer. I think we definitely should be going around to our database team, our security team, our compliance team, and making sure that we ask everybody these questions and make sure everybody's aware. And I think that you're actually going to probably get different results back. So I think, it's good to ask those questions, get the results back, and then validate the results and see what actually is out there. And there's obviously going to be a lot more questions, a lot more things that we can do. If you need assistance with this, definitely let us know here at Sayers, and we can come in there and help, and we can help automate it, with some tools to come out there and do discovery scans and find out what you have, where it's at, and kind of assist you in asking these questions and getting those answers.
Great, Chris. Thank you very much. All right. I think that concludes today's session. I hope if you have any questions, you will contact Sayers and directly or Imperva. And for more information, the information is on the web at info@imperva.com. And of course, our website is www.imperva.com. Chris, would you like to provide the Sayers website?
Absolutely. Sayers.com. And this is Chris Willis. I thank you for your time, Cheryl. And look forward to speaking with you again on a future webinar or call.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.